You're listening to Radio MD. She's a chiropractic holistic physician, best-selling author, international speaker, entrepreneur, and talk show host. She's Dr. Suzanne Bennett. It's time now for Wellness for Life Radio. Here's Dr. Suzanne.
We all have memory lapses from time to time. Difficult to spit out that word that is right on the tip of your tongue. Or you can't find those keys where you swear you have left them. Or you see a person you just met last weekend and you can't remember their name. Now, as you get older, these kind of memory blips may become even more common and frequent. Our next guest is here to tell you that you don't have to resign yourself to memory loss. Let's welcome Dr. Roger Landry, former chief flight surgeon at the Air Force Surgeon General's office in Washington, and preventive medicine physician who has spent the last decade smashing stereotypes of aging and redefining the possibilities of older adulthood. Great to have you here, Dr. Landry.
Well, thank you, Suzanne. It's an honor. Again, I'm an admirer of your work.
Thanks so much. Now, our listeners would love to learn some of these simple steps that you can give us that can provide our body from and our brain from deteriorating, which is the cause of memory loss, dementia, and maybe even Alzheimer's disease.
Well, sure. It's a very optimistic time. This disease and memory loss in general, or mental decline, cognitive impairment, these are things that bothered us so much because we didn't think we could do anything about it. Well, with scanning and the new research, we know we can. So, first of all, don't panic. Don't panic. I mean, you start misplacing your keys, not a problem. There's ways to combat that. I'll tell you what I did. But if you start wondering what the keys are for, well, then perhaps you see your doc and get an evaluation. But most cases of memory loss are due to things that you can do something about, and you can forget the implication that this is the beginning of your decline and your being settled in a chair and not being able to do anything because you can't remember anything. Not the case. Very few cases.
Well, good. That's really great to hear that you're being positive about all this. I mean, in USA, I believe we're in the top 3 countries around the world, and Finland and Iceland is the top 2 when it comes to death by dementia and Alzheimer's. So what is that we can do to prevent it? I mean, you're a preventive doctor, which I love. So what can we start with?
We're still learning about the disease. We don't know everything about it. We don't have a cure yet, but we're knocking on the door because this alone is going to break Medicare in about 15, 20 years, this disease alone. So there's a lot of attention to it, a lot of research dollars, and I am absolutely convinced we're going to come up with as close to a cure as, if not a cure. But in the meantime, we've learned a lot. We've learned that lifestyle can significantly alter the course. But let's step back a little bit. First of all, let's keep our brain as healthy as possible, okay? That's the beginning. We got to feed our brain, we got to protect our brain, and we got to challenge our brain. So feeding it. The brain needs blood in order to function properly and to be the best that it can be and to avoid the kind of diseases and symptoms that we worry about. And so that's a matter of getting blood to the brain, and that's a matter of paying attention to those things like movement, keeping moving, keeping your body trim. It is about not smoking. All these things interfere with getting blood to the brain, and it's a problem. Next, sleep. At night, sleep is good for your body, but at night, it's like there's a vacuum cleaner going over your brain, picking up all of the debris that occurred during the day. And if that doesn't occur, if someone doesn't have a good night's sleep, their memory is affected by about 12% to the negative for that day. And so sleep is very, very important. Again, this is all about keeping the brain healthy and feeding the brain. And so then we have to come also to the whole idea of protecting the brain. Now that's, of course, wearing helmets and try to avoiding head injury. That is devastating for anyone, but in an older adult, it is fraught with the more likelihood of some significant symptoms. But the other thing, and this is a big one, I'm sure for your listeners, as it is for me, and probably for you, Suzanne, is stress. We run around in a frenetic society and at a pace that our ancestors never knew. And our ancestors lived a life for, again, 99% of the time we've been on Earth that's quite different from ours. And our brains are still, as our bodies, are still more like a caveman physiology. So this is very destructive. And we see an increased incidence of Alzheimer's with those who are stressed. We see anatomic changes in people who are stressed. Now, multitasking is something that significantly stresses the brain. I know your listeners are going to say what? This is how I live. This is how I get my job. But we can only do one thing at a time. When we multitask, we're actually jumping from one task to the next. And over time, that creates large amounts of stress. So, yes, you may be called upon to do things, but be there when you're doing something. Put your full attention. And this, by the way, is a key aspect of memory. And then lastly, we've talked about feeding the brain and protect. We got to challenge our brain because we know now that we are the architects of our brain. If we challenge our brain, if we get a lot of blood to it and we challenge it by learning new things, Suzanne, we can actually see brain scan changes, the brain getting larger and heavier. We're growing new brain tissue and new neural pathways. And it looks like these neural pathways can protect us from the onset of symptoms of Alzheimer's. Now, we can, in the nun study, we showed that these nuns who were physically and mentally active, when they died, they actually had the brain of Alzheimer's with the plaques and the tangled nerves, yet they didn't have symptoms. The conclusion, their lifestyle of being physically and mentally active protected them or at least delayed the onset of symptoms. So this is the critical part. Take care of the brain first. That all work for you?
Oh, those are excellent steps that we can all work with right away. These are easy things, but, of course, most of us kind of forget about it. I truly believe that oxygenation to the brain is super important. And in one of my past Nature Secrets segments, I talked about the glymphatic system, which is the lymph system of the brain, where we really need to cleanse out the brain as well. And by getting more oxygenation and sleeping will help clean out those glymphatics that you talked about. I love the way you called, the vacuum cleaner, at night when you're sleeping, you're cleaning up that brain of our brain. And one of the things that I experienced about 5 years ago, and it was from a head and brain injury, and I had a terrible coronal plane compression of the head. And I can't tell you how bad my memory was at that time. I did so many things, and I took the right supplements, and I got the right care to heal that brain. And inflammation was a huge factor.
Sure, it was. Factor. Inflammation is the key to most of what ails us. In medical school, we thought this was a good thing to heal things. And we do need it to heal things. But we see now that it is probably the root of most chronic diseases and many of those chronic diseases that afflict us, including Alzheimer's and others. Well, good for you. You used everything available. That's excellent. So
that
maybe
was
we should
super
talk
important.
What someone might do to sort of enhance them. And you asked that one. And I've got to tell you, these are pretty simple. These are not exotic things. What did I do about those keys? I put a hook on the door as I came in, and that's where I put my keys. I don't lose my keys anymore. They're always there on the hook because that's where I put them. So sometimes it's just accommodating, so that we don't pay attention in our lives because we're going at such a frenetic pace. Our minds are chattering, they're whirling, and so most memory problems are due to focus or lack of focus, actually. So that when we're undergoing something or learning something, we're not focused on that, and therefore we forget. We're not focused on what we just saw. When we can drive for miles and not remember a thing of what we saw because our minds are somewhere else. So it's about being mindful. If you want to remember something, pay attention.
I love that. We've got to pay more attention to our lives at every moment. Wow, great info, Dr. Landry. For more information, go to livelongdieshort.com, livelongdieshort.com, or go to my site, drsuzanne.com, radio/radio. All right, this is Dr. Suzanne sharing natural strategies for ultimate health and wellness right here on Radio MD. Until next time, stay well.